The New Hampshire Youth Movement, your website calls for automatic voter registration, making election days holidays, free and accessible internet. It's a big move to stop voter suppression, among other things. Can you talk at all about the strategies NHYM plans to use for reducing voter suppression in this state, like in public elections? And then what are some of the approaches that you guys have working inside the two-party system? Because I know that at this point in time, there's a lot of breakdown, especially for young folks and millennials and Gen Z, Gen Z, who are really feeling hurt and lost at their futures, and how they feel in many ways betrayed by both parties. So if you talk about some of that would be great.
Yeah, and I'd love to date this back even a few years, because New Hampshire Youth Movement was majorly thrown off in our work by a bill called HB 1264, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which really was a direct attack on college students, who we know often make up the margin of victory here in New Hampshire. And as an organization that primarily turns out college students, we really saw this as a hugely personal attack by the GOP to really tell young people, like, no, we don't want your voices being heard. And I just get so angry when I think about our state simultaneously saying, oh, we need and want young people, and then telling out-of-state college students, actually, no, your vote doesn't count here. We don't want you to invest in, our local political scene. And I think it's so personal for me because when I was in college, getting involved in local politics in Western Mass, which I'm not even from Western Mass, I'm from upstate New York, but being able to get involved in my, local political sphere there, I worked on a local state reps race. It really gave me, the passion that I have today for politics. And so I just think, like, we're denying just personal investment of young people in our state by telling them they can't vote here. So I just see that whole thing as really personal. And it feels like, on one hand, yes, we're fighting for fair and open elections, but we're still in the fight for ensuring we can even vote at all. And I just want to make sure that doesn't get lost in this. The lawsuit that the ACLU is doing is still sort of concluding at this point, and it has just been the most confusing thing. There are people who have been lawyers for many years who can't understand this bill right now. And so just wanted to talk about that a little. But I think in general, one of the other reflections I've had is that the past few elections I've seen in New Hampshire, being at the polls, in college towns, there are lines out the door for same-day voter registration. We know that, most young people who go to the polls, a lot of them have not registered in advance. A lot of them don't have much time to do so. And so we always tell them, make sure, you know that you and all your friends can register right there. And I'm really concerned about that this coming year, just because we know that, the crowds that we see are going to be pretty unsafe. But at the same time, I also have concerns with switching entirely over to vote by mail, because I know it's going to inherently leave some people out, namely college students. So I also want to make sure that safe in-person practices aren't left out of this as we talk about vote by mail, because I know that, like, college students are just not going to turn out to vote if we entirely lose an in-person option. But right now, our Secretary of State, who's been in office over 40 years and his website is pretty outdated and clunky, we need to make sure that by the time September primary comes, we have online voter registration, which we're not even sort of close to having right now. That's a huge one for us. So that people can just go to the polls or vote by mail safely. And then I think the other big piece we really have to work on is there's going to be a huge education campaign that needs to be run, especially with the current state of absentee ballots. So as it's stated right now, if you request an absentee ballot, you actually have to check off disability as your reason for choosing an absentee ballot. And so they have expanded the definition of disability to include fear of getting sick due to a health crisis or actual sickness. But it's not going to be natural instinct for a lot of people to check off the box disability when that is not an identity that they've ever held before. And so I'm
Yeah.
really concerned about that framing and language and who that's going to leave out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think, to me too, that gets into this concept of like virtually any social program that we have or anything that we do to help folks, we inject it with so much means testing. And like, I really
Yeah.
feel like that comes in a lot of ways from Democrats who are trying to not just have their bills get tanked by Republicans. And the result is, we get something that's a real half measure and makes people feel alienated when they go to get the help. I mean, I've personally spoken about my own experiences with the unemployment in this state, and like, their questions are really rough. Like, it's just it kind of puts you through the ringer, and it's just it leaves a bad feeling. And I think if you look at some of the stuff that's been proposed in the national context, like the Sanders-Markey bill that was calling for just $2,000 a month until this is over. I mean, like, that just hops right over the entire "do you qualify for unemployment" thing. It's ridiculous. Something that I caught this morning as I was sort of like getting everything ready is the ACLU has actually pulled the lawsuit regarding 1264. Yeah. And I'm actually going to try and put it up on the stream screen here. I can't do it on a Zoom share, but I just want to show everybody who's watching. We've got it up top right now. This is an article on WMUR where it says Gardner praises end to 8-year ordeal over New Hampshire voting requirements. And, it's like, I think Bill Gardner has been a really like interesting character in all of this. And, they've got him quoted here saying, "We have lived through 8 years of this starting in 2012, this question of residence and domicile." And, they never cleared that up. Like, I always hate pointing this out to people, but these days semantics matter. We have gotten to a point in our society where things are just so detailed that literally the words you choose do matter. And if you're not willing to make distinction about something, then we default to kind of like saying no rather than saying yes. Right? So we're saying no to college students who are spending 9 out of 12 months here, if not all 12 months,
giving us a lot of their money.
Right, exactly. It's crazy. And just kind of shutting them out. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
This is it seems really wishy-washy for, and kind of like pearl clutchy on Gardner's part, where he's just like so glad this is over, and it's just been really horrible what they've done, and it hasn't been fair to Sununu, where we're the state that has the most relaxed laws when it comes to out-of-state voters. And it's like, hey, let's maybe remember that mentioning every other state is worse than us doesn't change the scenario. When you make progress, you then have to change the floor that you're starting on. If you're constantly saying, well, look how far we've come, then you're not gonna make any more progress.
Right.